Those few simple words bring to mind a myriad of images. From Terry Moore's indie hit, Strangers in Paradise, to blockbusters like Batman, The Dark Knight Returns by Frank Miller. From their humble beginnings as pulp adventure stories to today's million-dollar business, comic books are everywhere, from college curriculums to your local Megaplex. But can a simple, staple-bound paper funny book survive in a world dominated by digital media, like video games, television, the internet? This is the question that I set out to find an answer for. Can comic books survive?
Well, comic books started out in the United States as a way of creating a visual narrative that helped an immigrant population learn how to speak English. So it's a completely unique American art form. But what I find really interesting about it is that over the course of 100 years or so, the comic book has become a narrative art format that is accepted worldwide and is actually extraordinarily popular in Europe and Asia. So it's a very American art form that is taking on a really global visual emphasis in terms of contemporary culture and literature.
Well, it's a pretty seamless combination of words and pictures, which I think is naturally appealing to most people. Most people like stories, and most people like pictures.
I think accessibility. Anyone can create comics, and anyone who knows how to read can pick up and read a comic. And as a fan, I'm interested in storytelling, and I think comics can do a lot of things that no other medium can do.
For me, I think it's really interesting because it's a really marketable form of social commentary. Pretty much every comic you read has some form of social or political view to it, and I always thought that was really fascinating.
I think it is because it combines visual with narrative, and you can express your own opinions about the subject matter.
Do you think digital media like video games or anything hurt the comic book industry?
Right now, they definitely are. I mean, very few children. Well, for 27 years, that's how long I've been selling comics. And when I opened my first store in 1982, we would offer a free quarter comic to every kid that came in, or sometimes 3 free. And that was very popular, and nobody ever turned me down in those days. But now the vast majority of kids that we offer free comic books to say no thanks.
Hurt the comic book industry? I don't think they hurt the comic book industry. I think that they actually support the comic book industry. Now, the comic book industry itself is a rather specialized interest publication outlet. It's a small fraternity of publishers. The titles are fairly small in number, so any other method of getting the work out, I think, is actually supportive of the publications and the publishing houses, media. And one form feeds the other. I think it just broadens the interest.
A lot of people who I grew up with who read comics, they don't anymore because they spend all their money on video games. And I think it definitely detracts from people buying comics.
I don't think so, because, your comic fans are a lot similar to anime fans. They like to have stuff they can hold in their hand.
I think they complement one another really well.
People really like tangibility. They like to touch things. There was the same sort of concern about magazines and books for years. Would the fact that one would be able to download a book onto a laptop change the publishing industry? I don't think it changes the publishing industry a great deal. People like to hold things, they like the feel of paper, They like the texture. They like to bring something with them. It's the nature of the human being to be a tactile individual. And so I don't believe that downloading onto iPods or computers is going to take away from the publishing industry necessarily.
Well, I'd certainly make comics in a digital format, but I would kind of compare it to music. You know, they've had synthesizers for quite a while now, which, from what I understand, you can make the sound of any instrument on a synthesizer. But from what I can tell, you know, most music is still done in the old-fashioned way.
And I think the internet makes it easy for people to get their work seen, or to a place where it can be seen. But the result of that is that there's such a huge amount of comics online that it's rare that you'll be noticed. As far as mainstream comics, I don't think downloadable comics will ever take very much money away from the publishing industry. I've seen people try it, and I have yet to see anyone successfully make a significant amount of money from downloadable comics. I think to do that, some big name creators would have to make some internet exclusive comic books. And
Now, as far as alternate distribution systems of the printed material, like Amazon or whatever, obviously I'm biased since I own several brick and mortar stores, but I do know it seems a little unfair to me because Amazon doesn't charge sales tax, and I know in almost every case they get a better deal on the merchandise than I do, and then they use that better deal to undercut the brick and mortar stores, I could see that hurting the comic shops because it's competition, and it's not necessarily fair competition. If Amazon had to charge the same sales tax rates that we're required to charge, I'm not so sure that they would do so much business.
as a customer, I think some of the benefits of a comic store are, if I come in to buy my comics, I'll see things that I never would have thought to look for, and I can then buy those. Sure, they're cheaper on the internet, but I've bought comics off the internet before, and sometimes they're damaged. You never know how they're going to arrive. And you can always get, when you go into a comic book store, if it's a good store, you can always get what you want and what orders.
Well, with a comic book shop, you get to be around people who like the same thing, and you can bounce opinions off one another about the politics of comic books.
Plus, ordering off Amazon, if you buy it from a seller, you always run the risk of getting a bootleg, and that's just really irritating.
So there's a camaraderie in the comic book shop that you can't get over the internet. Another interesting thing about the way we buy our merchandise is that it's all non-returnable. This is about the last business that I know of that does not return anything that they buy. If you go to 7-Eleven, you might see a comic book rack there, but for every comic that sells off of that rack, 3 others are destroyed.
Comic books are growing today. I think that the industry is flourishing and it is broadening. It's going into different kinds of venues. The comic book is now a storyboard for potential ideas for films, for advertising, for graphic design, and if anything, I think the industry is broadening into a more sophisticated kind of publishing outlet.
I can do a spot illustration for someone that's going to end up on an air freshener and make 3 times the money I would make drawing like a 5-page comic that will see print and be distributed. And I've dealt with a lot of small press publishers, and it's very difficult for them to make money.
No, if nothing else, I think they've gotten stronger over the last 10 or 15 years
Yeah.
with the success of like Sin City and other graphic novels like that.
300. I think the films have helped a lot.
The comic book industry reached its peak financially. I'm talking of about $1 billion a year in sales in 1995. The publisher, Marvel Comics, decided to double the price of comics for no reason. DC, the number 2 publisher, followed suit. And within a year, the $1 billion industry had gone to a $250 million a year industry. We've managed to build it up over the last decade, from that low of 1996 of 250 million. I think last year's figures, which did include a lot of bookstore sales, I think we're up to 500 million.
I guess for a few years, my favorite single issue has been a 25-cent reprint of The Corpse, which is a Hellboy story.
As a kid, I always liked Spider-Man and Conan the Barbarian.
Mine's Japanese. It's Death Note. It's about a boy who finds a notebook that if he writes their name in it, they can kill anyone they want to in the world.
Well, my favorite character would be the Silver Surfer. I mean, some of that is nostalgic reasons, but I also think he's just a very cool character, kind of a philosophical guy, and who's willing to make a sacrifice for his fellow human beings, kind of like a Jesus-type guy, but with a surfboard.